Brad, a huge game this week. The last couple of weeks, teams stepped up beautifully. How much of a step up is it again against Collingwood?
I think it's a big step. I mean, that's taking nothing away from Port Adelaide and Sydney. They're both fantastic teams and top 6 teams from last year. But Collingwood have been in really good form. You know, they've only lost games to quality opposition in Fremantle and Geelong. So, you know, they were terrific again last week, and you know, I think they've got probably Gary Ablett aside. You know, the guy I regard as best player in the competition is Scott Pendlebury, and Travis Cloakes led the competition in contested marks and inside 50 marks over the last 5 years. So, you know, and while he hasn't been at his best, he generally saves that for us. So we'll be ready for him.
Do we expect Scott Thompson to go straight to him? He's in super form, Scotty.
I think he'll definitely spend time on him. I mean, we are fortunate that, you know, last week Michael Frito played, and he's played on Cloak before, and Grimer and Hansen and Thompson have all taken their turn. So, and that probably tells you that we haven't found the ideal method to contain him. So, again, while he hasn't been in the best of form, he's never far away from it.
Was the Sydney win a win of significance that sort of suggests you've taken a step that you want to?
I think it takes more than one game, that's for sure. But I really feel the Western Bulldogs win was important for us because it was a win that was, in a lot of ways, uncharacteristic to the footy we played over the last 2 years. It was a scrap. You know, it wasn't attractive by any stretch of the imagination, but you know, we were really happy to win that way. You know, we've won playing really good footy on other occasions, but that was an important win, and I think that prepared us pretty well for what we encountered up in Sydney. And it's a ground we haven't tasted victory for 10 years at. So I mean, that was a pretty important win for the football club.
Everyone's been talking about Brent McCaffrey all week. Do you expect the umpires to be paying some closer attention this week?
I think they're humans, so they've probably got to. I mean, it's going to be pretty hard to avoid, but I think that it's just another sign of the evolution of the game. I remember very distinctly Nathan Buckley writing an article when he finished playing and went into the media about how the tagger was dead. And I was midfield coach at Collingwood at the time, and he made a point of saying, mate, there are no taggers anymore. Well, he's changed his mind on that one, obviously. So McCaffrey's been doing it extremely well, and I'm not going to get into the debate about legalities of how he's doing it. The reality is he's kept some really good players down from their usual output, and we expect him to go to one of our good players, and the umpires will do their job, and we'll make sure we do ours.
How much discussion do you have in terms of if he goes to so and so, we've got to make sure we help him? I mean, how much do you talk about that?
We don't at all. You know, I think that if we get too caught up in all that, we'll take our focus off what's really important. And you know, we always talk about supporting our players, but you know, Brent Harvey's been tagged for 360 of his 365 games, so he's used to it. The team, the guys who play with him are used to that happening to him. Daniel Wells is used to it. You know, so I mean, nothing will change for us. We just got to go about our business and make sure we're playing within the rules.
Did you think that Richmond could have done more to protect Cochin, or I mean, would you expect more support for whoever gets tagged than that?
No, I'm not going to comment on Richmond. To be honest, I thought that, you know, my focus was on that game, on how Collingwood were playing, and so I'm not going to get drawn into what Richmond should or shouldn't have done.
In terms of your midfield depth, though, you must feel like you've got now plenty of options to cope if one guy gets shut out of the game.
Yeah, well, that's been a work in progress over the last 5 years. You know, we've been, I suppose, like a lot of sides, we rely on our good players. We're no different there, but we've had to build a midfield that was capable of playing well when Zeeble wasn't, you know, the dominant player in there, or Swallow wasn't the dominant player, and they haven't been available for the most part of the year so far. So I think it's pleasing that our midfield's still been in pretty good shape.
You're going to do something about Maxwell? He seems to have been given that sort of bit of freedom as they constantly try and get the loose man back in defence, and he's become super important.
Yeah, he's a really important player. I've observed Nick up close under the Moldhouse regime when I was an assistant coach there. I've got nothing but admiration for him. So I think it's almost humorous that people question his worth to the Collingwood side, and now we're questioning what tactics we have to put in place to counter him. So he's a good player. He's a really important part of their defence, and you know, he's always been a terrific leader.
Brad, philosophically, the rebirth of the tagger, is there a reason behind it, do you think? Is there something that's changed in the game that there is these guys coming through again now?
Yeah, I think there's definitely something in it. I don't want to go into too much detail as to why, but I think it's always been a coach's prerogative that you look to create the circumstances that are going to help your team play well, and you negate the strengths of the opposition. And I'm sure that's what Nathan's looking at now. And McCaffrey's had Cochin and Kieran Jack the last 2 weeks, Steve Johnson before that, and done a great job. So our job would be largely to provide him with a number of options for Collingwood's midfield to have their handful as a whole, rather than just McCaffrey himself.
Is the interchange an issue because of that, like what you're just alluding to, perhaps where players got to be on the field a bit longer, so perhaps try and wear down that player and you can't necessarily break a tag as much, perhaps going to the bench and come back on the time?
But I don't think so. I mean, potentially that's the case. My opinion, you can still go forward and you can still play in different positions. So, I think it's just the fact that if you've got a player who's capable of playing the roles that Brent McCaffrey is, then you use it to your advantage. Fremantle have done it really well, and amongst others.
What's the story with Zeeble? Will he play?
We hope so. I mean, I was really confident because the medicos had instilled that confidence in me that he'd play this week. Look, and even if they clear him medically, it's the decision if he doesn't play will be up to them, but the decision if he does play will be up to me. So if they clear him medically, I've still got to make the final call on whether I'm comfortable taking a risk with him, because the way he plays, when he's got a shoulder injury, it's always a risk. So he'll train today and we'll make that call and name the side tomorrow.
So that means either seniors or nothing, or seniors or VFL?
Yeah, no, he won't be playing VFL.
More likely than unlikely to play, would you say?
50-50.
I saw the captain on the field having a bit of a run. How far away is he from...
Hopefully only a week away from playing at some level. He will play VFL footy before he comes back into senior selection, and we're hoping that'll be another week. He feels ready to go, so I mean that's a real vote of confidence that he wants to play. But the doctor and physio are holding him back a little bit at the moment because we've got to be cautious with him. But in himself, he feels ready to play, and he brought his boots up to Sydney just in case. But he's going to play some VFL footy before he plays AFL.
There's been some talk about, I suppose, the decline of the big key forward, etc. Does that detract from the quality of blokes like Thompson and some of the other good defenders going around?
I suppose, look, we rated Scott Thompson's game extremely highly on the weekend. John Longmire did too. You can see that's reflected in the coaches' vote. So, I think, I think he's as good a key defender as there is going around in the competition at the moment. His performances so far reflect that. But I think I heard Damien Hardwick say that key defenders at this time of year are really up and about, and the pressure's really high. As the season goes on and fatigue sets in a little bit, potentially the game opens up a bit more and makes it harder for those key defenders. But we'd love another Scotty Thompson, that's for sure.
But Black was pretty important.
Yeah,
highlighting the key forwards role.
Oh yeah, he was fantastic. I still think that the key forwards are the hardest players to replace in the competition, and Drew Petrie was enormous for us on the weekend. Played a role for us in those conditions, and to have a 197 centimetre key forward and as agile and as hard working as he is really valuable. So they're still up there with the most valuable players in the comp.
You mentioned you can't get bogged down too much in one player like McCaffrey, but is he someone that stood out, like in reviewing Collingwood start to the season?
No more so than any other. Although there is one that stands out. Scott Pendlebury stands out a fair bit. Good player.
Joel Selwood might have something to say about Scott Pendlebury being your second best player.
Yeah, I'm biased because I've seen him up close and personal. I've seen his progression from a draftee through to an elite player, and I'm sure Joel Selwood will respond if he gets prickled by it.
Will you do a bit of tagging yourself then if you rate Pendlebury so highly? Have you got a plan for him?
Oh, we're certainly not going to let him run around by himself, that's for sure.